Resign or die! I own you, Karen.
The HOA tyrant and the federal reckoning. The night was unusually still in our quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind of evening where you could hear crickets chirping and distant dogs barking. That peace was shattered when flashing blue lights pierced through our living room curtains, casting eerie shadows on the walls like a scene from a late-night thriller. I bolted from the couch, my heart racing as if I'd just run a marathon. Peering out the window, I saw two police cruisers parked haphazardly on the curb, their lights spinning relentlessly. An unmarked black van idled nearby. And there, in the middle of it all, stood our HOA president, Margaret Hensley, her arm extended dramatically, pointing straight at our house as if accusing us of some heinous crime. "Laura," I called out, my voice cracking with panic. "What in God's name did you do?" But my wife, Laura, didn't react with the fear I'd expected. She carefully set her steaming coffee mug on the side table, crossed her arms, and gazed out the window with a look of quiet satisfaction that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. This wasn't the reaction of someone caught off guard. This was the calm of someone who'd been waiting for this moment all along. We'd only been in Willow Creek for 2 short months, and I'd convinced myself we'd finally found our slice of the American dream. After years in a cramped downtown apartment where the noise never stopped, honking horns, sirens, and neighbors arguing through thin walls, this place felt like paradise. Tree-lined streets where mature oaks provided shade on hot summer days, well-manicured lawns that spoke of pride in homeownership, and kids zooming around on bicycles without their parents hovering like helicopters. It was the kind of neighborhood where people still waved hello and hosted backyard barbecues. At 52, I was ready for that slower pace. I ran a modest woodworking business out of our garage, crafting custom furniture, sturdy oak tables, hand-carved bookshelves that locals had started ordering. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and let me work with my hands, something I'd always loved since tinkering in my dad's shop as a kid. Laura, my partner of 15 years, worked from home in what she vaguely described as community management. She'd always been private about her job, shutting her laptop whenever I entered the room, not in a secretive way, but more as if she were drawing a firm line between work and our personal life. "Just answering emails, Tom," she'd say with a smile, and I'd nod, not pressing further. Who wants to dive into the minutiae of spreadsheets and meetings over a home-cooked dinner? Laura spent her free time transforming our backyard into a gardener's haven, meticulously planning where to plant roses, herbs, and tomatoes. I'd watch her from the kitchen window, her sun hat tilted just so, typing away on her laptop amid the flower beds. Occasionally, I'd catch glimpses over her shoulder, phrases like compliance violation, enforcement standards, or federal oversight. When I'd ask, she'd chuckle softly, a laugh that now, in hindsight, carried a hint of irony, and say, "Some of these communities think they can bend the rules however they want." I never dug deeper. I trusted her, and besides, our life was good. Or so I thought. The trouble brewed slowly at first, like a storm gathering on the horizon. It began with a knock on our door on a crisp Friday afternoon. There stood Margaret Hensley, the self-appointed queen of Willow Creek's Homeowners Association. Her blonde hair was coiffed to perfection, not a strand out of place, and she wore a designer blouse and slacks that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. In her manicured hands, she clutched a stack of papers, and her smile was the kind that didn't reach her eyes, polite on the surface but laced with judgment. "Good afternoon," she said in a tone that dripped with false warmth. "I'm Margaret Hensley, your community leader. I've brought a special invitation for Tuesday's HOA meeting. We do hope you'll join us. Participation is so important for maintaining our high standards." Laura accepted the letter gracefully, scanning it with the same casual interest she gave to junk mail. "Thank you, Margaret. I'll certainly consider it." Margaret's smile twitched, her eyes narrowing as if Laura had just insulted her personally. "Consider it? Oh, dear, this isn't optional. Attendance is mandatory for all residents. We have strict guidelines to uphold. It's what keeps Willow Creek the envy of the county." Laura remained unflappable, her voice steady. "I understand. Have a good day." As the door closed, I caught a flicker of something dark in Margaret's expression, like a predator sensing resistance. I remember thinking, standards for what? Breathing the fresh air. But I shrugged it off. Neighborhood politics seemed trivial compared to the real world. That evening, as we sat down to dinner, Laura's famous pot roast with mashed potatoes, she pulled out the letter again, her eyebrows arching slightly at the dense paragraphs filled with legalese about community compliance, mandatory governance participation, and veiled threats of fines for non-attendance. It read more like a binding contract for a secretive society than a simple neighborhood invite. Just then, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, sighed softly, and excused herself to the garden to take the call. From the open window, I overheard fragments. You must adhere to the fair housing laws we've established. No, banning pets based on breed is discriminatory and violates federal regulations. When she returned, her face was composed, but there was a new edge to her focus. Who was that? I asked, curious. Just work stuff, Tom. A community in Colorado is having issues. She sat back down, but her mind seemed elsewhere, typing responses on her laptop with a signature that read, Laura Carter, Senior Compliance Officer, Community Oversight Division, Department of Housing and Urban Development. The pieces were starting to click, but I was too focused on the delicious meal to connect the dots fully. Tuesday rolled around, and Laura decided against attending the meeting. She was out in the garden, kneeling among her tomato plants, watering them with care, when the house phone rang. It was Margaret, her voice slicing through the receiver like a knife. Mrs. Carter, this isn't optional. Your absence is noted, and there will be consequences. Laura didn't even pause her gardening. I'm occupied right now, Margaret. If there's something urgent, feel free to email me. There was a stunned silence. Then Margaret's tone turned venomous. Who do you think you are? These are our community rules. Laura hung up without another word, but I noticed a subtle shift in her expression, a dangerous glint that suggested Margaret had just crossed an invisible line. The retaliation came swiftly. The next morning, 2 crisp violation notices were shoved under our front door, as if we were being served court papers. The first cited our rose bushes for not matching the approved community color palette. Apparently, our vibrant reds were too bold, and we needed to switch to soft pastels or face fines. The second claimed our garden tool storage bin was positioned 3 inches outside the regulated zone, whatever that meant. Combined penalties, a whopping $800. I stared at the papers, my blood boiling. $800 for flowers being too colorful and a toolbox slightly askew? This is insane. Laura read them methodically, nodding as if cataloging errors in a report. She pulled out a yellow legal pad and began scribbling notes in shorthand that looked suspiciously like legal jargon. Interesting tactics, she murmured, her voice cool and analytical. She's quite inventive with her interpretations. I couldn't let it slide. Digging into the HOA's online archives that afternoon, I uncovered a pattern in Margaret's communications. While standard HOA templates used courteous language about guidelines and suggestions, Margaret's missives were aggressive, packed with threats of legal action, liens on properties, and even eviction warnings for minor infractions. It was like she was waging psychological warfare on her neighbors. I showed Laura what I'd found, and she studied the documents with the intensity of a prosecutor preparing for trial. This aligns with what I've seen before, she said cryptically, which should have been my first major clue that her community management role went far deeper than I'd imagined. Margaret didn't stop at fines. She took to the neighborhood's private online group, posting photos of our house with captions dripping in passive aggression. It's disappointing when some new residents don't grasp the Willow Creek spirit. We must protect what we've built to maintain our property values. The post exploded with reactions like hearts and comments from strangers we'd never met. Totally agree. Margaret. Standards matter, and outsiders always cause trouble. I felt a mix of rage and humiliation scrolling through it all. These people knew nothing about us except that our roses were too vibrant, yet they were ready to vilify us based on Margaret's word alone. Maybe we should just apologize and blend in, I suggested to Laura, hoping to de-escalate. Her response was chilling, a half-smile that didn't reach her eyes. Margaret should pray I stay quiet, she said softly, her words carrying the weight of an unspoken threat. In that moment, I realized my wife wasn't one to be bullied. She was choosing restraint, but for how long? Laura fired back in the group with a measured, professional reply. Thank you for your concern, Mrs. Hensley. Upon reviewing Willow Creek's bylaws, I've identified several clauses that appear to conflict with current federal housing guidelines. I suggest we schedule a discussion on compliance matters. The comment sparked curiosity among a few members, who began asking questions about these federal guidelines and Laura's background. Margaret, clearly rattled, deleted the post within an hour and replaced it with a defiant one. We don't need outside specialists meddling in our community affairs. The emphasis on our made it sound like she owned every blade of grass in the neighborhood. The social isolation hit hard. Walking to the mailbox the next day, I overheard two neighbors whispering, "Those new people think they're above the rules." They clammed up when they saw me, but the damage was done. I felt eyes on me every time I stepped outside, paranoia creeping in like fog. Our once welcoming street now felt hostile, neighbors avoiding eye contact or crossing the road to dodge conversation. Meanwhile, Laura remained remarkably composed, jotting more notes on her legal pad about behavior patterns, escalation protocols, and community response mechanisms. "One more step," she whispered to herself, "and I'll pull the lever they can't even imagine." Margaret's harassment evolved into a full-blown campaign. She'd patrol our block like a self-appointed sheriff, clipboard in hand, color-coded tabs fluttering in the breeze. I'd glance out the window to see her measuring our curb, noting the angle of our mailbox, or scrutinizing the placement of our welcome mat. One afternoon, she even brought a measuring tape to check if our flower bed encroached on what she deemed common area, a claim debunked by our property survey. Who has this much time on their hands? I muttered to Laura, frustrated. Neighbors, influenced by Margaret's online crusade, began shunning us outright. The woman next door, who'd once chatted about recipes, now pretended not to see us. The man across the street stared suspiciously, as if we were plotting neighborhood anarchy. Then came the psychological warfare. Margaret circulated anonymous letters to the entire block, accusing my woodworking shop of being an illegal home business, complete with suspicious power tool noises and unknown visitors picking up packages that could affect insurance rates. It was a blatant lie. I had all my city permits in order, but the insinuations turned whispers into outright avoidance. I started feeling anxious just checking the mail, wondering who was watching and judging. Laura, ever the picture of calm, delved deeper into her work. Her laptop screen displayed the Federal Community Standards Board website, filled with dense government documents. An encrypted email popped up, urgent, federal oversight inquiry. Her demeanor shifted to one of grim focus. "Tom, give me a moment," she said, her voice firm. Phone calls followed, laced with terms like regulatory oversight and systematic violations. I caught her saying, "The financial irregularities suggest potential interstate prosecution." When I pressed for details, she brushed it off as colleagues specializing in community issues. But the official tone, the government logos, I knew something bigger was afoot. Fed up, I confronted Margaret directly as she measured our driveway yet again. "Mrs. Hensley, can we talk? Maybe resolve this without all the documentation?" She looked up, her eyes cold and calculating. "You'll learn the hard way that community standards come first," she snapped. "And you have no clue about my influence here." Her words hung like a threat, but I refused to back down. The tipping point was Margaret's neighborhood watch meeting, ostensibly to discuss disruptive residents who refused to follow protocols and believed federal rules superseded local traditions. She didn't name us, but the description fit like a glove. I imagined our neighbors gathered in someone's living room, debating how to handle us like we were vermin. The humiliation burned deep. Laura, sensing my distress, finished encrypting files on her laptop. "I hoped it wouldn't come to this," she said, her eyes steely. "But now I'm ready." That Friday night, the blue lights returned. Margaret had called the cops over Laura skipping another HOA meeting, standing on our curb with a thick binder of evidence, photos of our violations, timelines of our rebellious behavior. "I've warned them repeatedly," she ranted to the officers. "They're hiding something dangerous." The younger cop seemed unimpressed. "This is civil, ma'am." But the older one eyed the financial docs in her binder curiously. Laura emerged, folder in hand. "Officers, allow me to clarify." She presented papers that shifted the mood instantly. These details, Willow Creek HOA's financial irregularities funds misused for personal gain. Margaret blustered, but Laura's authority shone. I enforce federal housing laws. Margaret's actions violate the code. As the cops reviewed, I whispered, Laura, what's happening? Justice, she replied. Inside, Laura revealed her office. Georgetown Law degree, HUD awards, federal ID. I'm a senior compliance officer, investigating HOAs nationwide. Her phone rang FBI. You've cracked our case, the agent said. Margaret was linked to multi-state fraud. The community meeting became Margaret's downfall. Laura, on speaker with the FBI, exposed her embezzlement across 7 states. Chaos ensued. Neighbors demanded answers. Days later, Margaret's break-in attempt was caught on camera, leading to her arrest. 6 months on, Margaret got 5 years for stealing $2 million. Willow Creek flourished under new leadership. Our garden thrived, and I marveled at Laura's hidden strength. What do you think about this story? Have you ever faced a bully like Margaret, whether in an HOA or elsewhere? How do you feel about using authority to fight injustice? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective on power, corruption, and standing up for what's right.